For 3 years, I let him believe I was nobody, a struggling artist barely scraping by in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, living paycheck to paycheck. He loved that version of me, until he didn't. The day he brought her to our apartment and called me dirty, he had no idea he was insulting one of the wealthiest women in America. His face when he found out? Priceless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story, my story, is about more than just money. It's about respect, character, and the kind of karma that changes everything. Before I dive in, do me a favor. If you love stories where the underdog wins and karma serves justice on a silver platter, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because you won't believe how this ends. Trust me, every second of this story is worth it. Now, let me tell you about the 3 years that changed my life forever. My name is Naomi, and 3 years ago, I met Christopher at a small community art show in Brooklyn. I was there displaying my watercolor paintings, something I genuinely love doing. And he walked in wearing this expensive suit, looking completely out of place among the bohemian crowd. He stopped at my booth, smiled at one of my pieces, and we started talking. He was charming, confident, and there was something refreshing about the way he looked at me, like I was just a woman he found interesting, not a walking bank account. You see, most people don't know this, but I'm Naomi Devereaux. My grandmother started with a single laundromat in Harlem 60 years ago and built it into one of the largest commercial real estate empires in the country. We own properties in 47 states, office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. My net worth, $2.3 billion. But Christopher didn't know any of that, and I wanted to keep it that way. My last relationship had ended in disaster when I discovered my ex was only interested in my family's money. He had this whole plan to use me as his ticket into high society. When my father found out, he sat me down and gave me advice I'll never forget. He said, "Baby girl, find someone who loves you for you, not your last name, not your bank account, just you." So when I met Christopher, I made a decision. I would be just Naomi, the struggling artist who worked at a small gallery in Manhattan, living simply, finding joy in the little things. I wanted to know if someone could love me without the billions attached. Christopher was a pharmaceutical sales manager, mid-level, but ambitious. He came from old money. His family had money, but nothing close to what mine had. And he loved being the provider. He loved taking me to nice restaurants and paying the bill, loved telling his friends about how he was taking care of me. At first, it was sweet. We'd have these beautiful moments together, rooftop dinners where we'd watch the sunset over the city, long walks through Central Park where he'd hold my hand and talk about his dreams. He taught me about wine, about his work, about his world. And I fell in love with him, not because of what he could give me, but because of those quiet moments when it felt like we really understood each other. His family was a different story. From the first time he brought me home for Sunday dinner, I could feel the judgment. His mother would look at my simple dresses and give these tight-lipped smiles. "How quaint," she'd say about my art career. Christopher's father and I always hoped he'd settle down with someone more established. I'd smile and nod, letting it roll off my back. The irony wasn't lost on me. If only they knew that the building where they held their precious charity luncheons was owned by my family. But I kept quiet. I kept playing the role, because I believed in what Christopher and I had. I believed love was enough. Then things started to change. About 6 months ago, Christopher got promoted to regional director. Suddenly, he was attending upscale pharmaceutical conferences, networking with executives, mingling with what he called his kind of people. The subtle comments started creeping in. He'd look at my paint-stained jeans and say, "Maybe you should dress better when you're with my colleagues." Or he'd compare me to the polished women at his company events. "They're so put together, you know, so professional." Each comment was like a small cut, but I told myself he was just stressed from work. I told myself it would pass. That's when Felicity entered the picture. She was a junior executive at his company, blonde, from some wealthy Connecticut family. I first noticed her name popping up in his texts, late-night messages about work projects, then the unexplained absences, the nights he'd come home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I wasn't blind. I knew something was happening, but what hurt more than the cheating was watching the man I loved transform into someone I didn't recognize. He became cold, critical. "Why can't you be more ambitious like Felicity?" He'd snap. "She's going places. She understands success." And then came the comment that should have been my final straw. We were getting ready for one of his work dinners, and I had paint under my fingernails from working on a commission piece. He looked at me with such disgust and said, "You're always covered in paint. It's kind of dirty, dirty." That word echoed in my head for days. But still, I stayed. I wanted to believe the man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. I wanted to give him a chance to prove me wrong, to choose us. My best friend Lauren, the only person who knew my real identity, kept telling me to walk away. "Show him who you really are and watch him grovel," she'd say. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed to see how far he would go. I needed to know, without a doubt, who Christopher really was when he thought I had nothing to offer him. The answer came 2 weeks later, and it shattered me. I came home early from the gallery one afternoon. I had closed up early because I wasn't feeling well. Heartache will do that to you. I walked into our apartment and there they were, Christopher and Felicity, in our living room, on our couch. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Christopher just stood up, straightened his shirt, and looked at me with these cold, dead eyes. "I'm done pretending," he said. "I need someone on my level." Felicity didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. She actually laughed, this cruel, tinkling laugh that made my stomach turn. "Did you really think he'd stay with someone like you?" she said, looking me up and down like I was something stuck to her shoe. But Christopher wasn't finished. He walked over to where I kept my art supplies, my paints, my brushes, everything I loved, and started throwing them into trash bags. "Look at yourself," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Paint under your nails. Thrift store clothes. You're dirty, Naomi. Felicity comes from class. Real class. The kind you'll never understand." He threw the bags by the door and crossed his arms. "I want you out by the end of the week. Felicity's moving in." I stood there, frozen, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. This man I'd loved, who I'd shared 3 years of my life with, was throwing me away like garbage and calling me dirty while he did it. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my purse, walked out, and took a taxi to the plaza, specifically to the penthouse suite of the plaza, which my family happens to own. I sat in that beautiful suite, surrounded by luxury, and I broke down. I cried for the relationship I'd lost, for the disrespect I'd endured, for every moment I'd made myself small, hoping he'd see my worth. And then I called Lauren. Through my tears, I told her everything. And you know what she said? "He wants to see class. Let's show him what real power looks like." It was time to stop hiding. It was time for Christopher to meet the real Naomi Devereaux. 2 weeks later, the annual New York Real Estate Magnates Gala was being held at the Plaza. It's one of the biggest events in the industry. All the major players attend. And that year, I was the keynote speaker. Christopher's pharmaceutical company had contracts with several major property management firms, so he was on the guest list. He'd be there with Felicity on his arm, probably bragging about his new sophisticated girlfriend. What he didn't know was that he was about to come face to face with the woman he'd called dirty. Except this time, she'd be standing on a stage, commanding the room, introducing a $100 million initiative to create affordable housing across the country. The night of the gala, I transformed. My stylist worked magic, designer gown, professional makeup, hair swept up elegantly. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. But it wasn't just the clothes or the styling. It was the way I carried myself. For 3 years, I'd made myself smaller, dimmer, less than what I was. Tonight, I was taking back my power. I arrived at the plaza, and the energy in the room shifted. People turned, whispered, reached for their phones. The photographers went crazy. I could hear the murmurs. "Is that Naomi Devereaux? I heard she's unveiling something huge tonight. I walked through that crowd with my head high, greeting industry leaders, shaking hands with people who managed my properties without knowing I was their landlord's granddaughter. And then I saw him. Christopher was across the room with Felicity, holding a champagne glass, laughing at something someone said. Then his eyes found me. I watched the confusion cross his face. He squinted, leaned forward, said something to Felicity. She looked over too. I could read his lips from across the room. That woman looks like, but he couldn't quite believe it. How could his broke, dirty, struggling artist ex-girlfriend be here at one of the most exclusive events in New York, looking like she owned the place? Well, technically, I did own the place, but he was about to find that out. When it was time for my speech, I walked onto that stage and looked out at hundreds of faces, important faces, powerful faces, and somewhere in the middle, Christopher's pale, shocked face. I began speaking about my grandmother, about how she'd grew from nothing and built an empire through sheer determination and brilliant business sense. I talked about responsibility, about using wealth to create opportunities for others. And then I unveiled the initiative, $100 million to develop affordable housing in underserved communities. The room erupted in applause. Behind me, images flashed on the screen. My grandmother's first laundromat, our first apartment building, then the growth, property after property, state after state, Forbes covers, business awards, headlines reading, Devereaux Empire Expands, and Naomi Devereaux, billionaire, at 32. I didn't look at Christopher during the speech. I didn't need to. I could feel the moment it all clicked for him. The moment he realized that the woman he'd called dirty, the woman whose art supplies he'd thrown in trash bags, was one of the wealthiest and most powerful people in that room. After my speech, I was swarmed with congratulations. Industry leaders wanted to talk partnerships. Philanthropists wanted to collaborate. And Felicity's father, a real estate developer who I recognized immediately, pushed his way through the crowd to introduce himself. The irony was delicious. "Miss Devereaux," he gushed, "what an honor. My firm would love to discuss opportunities to work with you." I smiled graciously, shook his hand and said, "Actually, we already work together. You're currently leasing 3 of my properties downtown." His face went white. He excused himself quickly, probably to find Felicity, and ask her why she never mentioned that Christopher's ex was Naomi Devereaux. Christopher tried to approach me after the crowd cleared. I saw him weaving through people, Felicity trailing behind him looking mortified. But my security team, yes, I have security, politely intercepted him. "I'm sorry, sir, Ms. Devereaux isn't taking meetings right now." I watched him argue, watched him pull out his phone. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with texts. "Please let me explain. I didn't know. We need to talk." Another one. "Naomi, I made a mistake. Please give me a chance." And another. "I still love you. I always loved you." I read them all, felt absolutely nothing, and typed back one simple sentence. "There's nothing to discuss with someone who finds me dirty." The fallout was immediate and brutal. Christopher's company executives discovered he'd insulted Naomi Devereaux, a major player in the real estate world. My family's companies had partnerships with several pharmaceutical property management firms, and I was currently reviewing all our contracts to ensure they met our ethical standards. Suddenly, Christopher wasn't the rising star anymore. He was the liability, the man who'd been too stupid to recognize greatness when he had it. His promotion was reconsidered. He was quietly moved to a lower position. Felicity broke things off within days. Her family was horrified to be associated with him after the story started circulating in their circles. Old money loves gossip, and this story was too good not to share. But the sweetest karma came a week later. Christopher received an eviction notice from his apartment. The building he'd kicked me out of, I owned it. Had owned it the entire time we were together. The notice gave him 30 days, but I was feeling generous. I gave him 1 week, the same timeline he'd given me. And just like he'd done with my art supplies, his belongings ended up in trash bags on the curb. My building manager sent me a photo, and I couldn't help but smile. Poetic justice at its finest. You know what's funny? I never wanted revenge. I never set out to destroy Christopher's life or humiliate him. I just wanted respect. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I could provide. And when he showed me his true character, when he called me dirty and threw away my dreams like they were worthless, he destroyed himself. I didn't hide my wealth to test him or trick him. I hid it to protect my heart. But his true colors showed themselves anyway. Real class isn't about money or connections or wearing the right clothes to the right events. Real class is about how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. Today, I'm thriving. I launched a foundation in my grandmother's name, focusing on creating opportunities for women entrepreneurs in underserved communities. I've been featured in major publications talking about wealth, responsibility, and staying grounded. My art, I still paint, because that was never about money. It was about joy. And Christopher, last I heard, he's living with his parents, working a job 3 levels below where he started, and known in his social circles as the man who threw away a billionaire because he thought she wasn't good enough. He texts me sometimes, even now, apologies, explanations, pleas for another chance. I never respond. There's nothing left to say. If this story taught you something about real character and the karma that comes for people who judge others by their bank accounts, smash that like button. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been underestimated? How did it feel when they realized they were wrong? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because I've got more stories of karma that will absolutely blow your mind. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by someone else's blindness. Remember, stay humble, stay real, and never let anyone call you dirty when you're pure gold, because eventually the truth always comes out. And when it does, karma doesn't just knock on the door, it breaks it down.